Hello and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NacheSnow.com. Welcome to another episode. Okay, so today we have SaVonne Anderson on from Aya Paper Co. Such a good episode. We go into all the things from just choosing your own journey and asking yourself truly what do you want so you can figure out what to do next. And then of course we just go into her brand and why she created it. And I love that her brand not only touches on representation, because representation does matter, and she wanted to make sure that she had a brand that represented her community, but then also she is an advocate for environmental justice, so making sure that her brand reflected her beliefs in that too was just really just amazing to hear. And so I had a great time talking to her. I felt inspired after I got off the interview with her and then after listening to this episode again. So I know you guys are going to love it. So before we dive in, just know that the show notes for this page is over at NacheSnow.com/137. If you love the podcast, please go ahead and open up your podcast app and rate me 5 stars. If you're on Apple Podcasts, give me a thumbs up. If you're on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you are so you don't miss an episode. To support the podcast and support yourself, remember if you head on over to NacheSnow.com and click on courses and journals, you'll see the Life Cleanse journal, the digital version of it that you can use with GoodNotes or whatever PDF editing app. And then you'll also have links to my Skillshare courses and some other digital goodies that I have over there. So be sure to check that out. All right, let's get into this episode. Hello, SaVonne, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I have your website up now, so you might hear some clickety click as I click through and ask you some questions. But love your brand, love everything about it. But before I jump into how you were able to create your company, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about you and your background?
Yes, definitely. So I am the founder of Aya Paper Co. I started this company back in 2019, but before that, I was a graphic designer. I worked at a contemporary art museum in New York for a while, and I also have been an adjunct professor at Fordham University. And I've always just had a passion for design and for bringing joy to Black folks. That's what feels like my life's purpose. So that's why I started my business. I am a Jersey girl. I was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, and that's where the business is still right now. And yeah, that's a little bit about who I am and what I was doing before I got to this business.
And so just to set the stage, are you doing this full time or do you still have a 9 to 5 and then you do this on nights and weekends?
So this is my full-time job now. When I started it in 2019, I still did have a 9 to 5, but about 8 months into having the business, February of last year is when I quit my full-time job to spend all of my energy and efforts on this business. And as we know now, that was just a month before the COVID pandemic. So yeah, it was not the trajectory that I necessarily imagined, but I just took a risk on myself because I felt like I was going to win. And I'm glad that I did.
What was the driver behind deciding to go full time? Because sometimes people just know it. Sometimes people have a life event, like maybe they get laid off for a job. Other times sales are just so crazy, people have to decide between their business and their job. What was that tipping point for you?
I think I had been wanting to. I've been thinking about leaving my job for a little while before I actually had done it. And the reason that I had wanted to do that was mostly because I was looking for a new challenge. I felt like in the job that I had previously, I was just ticking off items from like a checklist, like a to-do list. Like these are just the things you have to do. I didn't feel like I was challenging myself or learning new things in an environment where I got to make more decisions outside of just the design. And I love designing, but I'm also interested in marketing and business development and so many other things. And I wasn't able to fully exercise that. So once I had started I realized that this was so much more fulfilling work because I got to do all of different things and I saw the impact of what I was doing immediately. That's the other thing when you're working at like a large business. A lot of times there's so many barriers to progress and innovation because you're on a big team. You can't just make those decisions and calls. There's so many, you got to go to the people above you and the person above them. So with my own business, I just felt so liberated in the ability to do the work that I wanted to do on my own terms and to do things that excited me, things that were challenges, to take risks that I wasn't able to do at my job. And so, yeah, when I started the business, I was like, okay, maybe a year or two into doing this, I can leave my job. But I didn't even make it to a full year because I just saw the potential in the business but this was before COVID. So we were doing a lot of events in marketplaces. So I would be at these events and people would be coming up and we would get invited to all these different things and started to get like some press features. And I was like, okay, this is like picking up some steam. And I just started to think so much bigger about what the opportunities were for the brand and the impact that we could have. And I knew that I could not do that while still giving 40 plus hours of my time to someone else's business. So I just had to make a decision of like, do I want to continue to just, treat it like a nights and weekends thing, which, is okay. But I knew that it would slow down the progress that I knew we could make. So that's why I just kind of decided to take the leap. And I feel like whenever I hear people talking about when did they know that moment, people talk about how they saved their money and started to, they made the decision once they were making the same amount. And that was not my story. I just really took a risk and I was able to take that because at the time I was living with family. So that made it easier for me. My living expenses were minimal. So that's why I also was like, okay, if I'm going to make this jump, this is the time. I kind of have a safety net. So I definitely think like everybody's safety net looks different. For some people, it's cash. For some people, it's a community. But I think it's just really important to figure out what are the things that you need to feel comfortable with making that jump. And for me, like I had my safety net of community and I felt like there was a lot of traction building for the business, but there was no way I was going to get to the point where I was making the amount of money that I wanted without more time. That's just like, for me, it needs more time and energy and effort for it to fully flourish. So yeah, it was a lot of just like thinking about where I wanted to go and what the trajectory would be and being willing to make that jump.
I love everything you just said, and the people who've been listening to the podcast for a while know that I like to focus on this because to me it is important for everybody to know that everybody's journey is a little bit different. And because sometimes some people will look at someone's journey and be like, oh my God, like, how are they able to do that? Or I need to do what they did. And what you said is like perfect. Like, you need to figure out what your safety net is and what's meaningful to you and what, value you want to add to the world. And can you add that value from where you are? And there's just so many different variables and everybody's story is so different.
And that's what I try to instill other people too. Like, when it comes to building a business, I feel it's important to do your research and to kind of see what's out there and learn from other people's mistakes. But there's a lot of things that you will just have to learn on the job as you're going. And just trusting that, like you said, just because it worked for somebody else doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. And I think that it's especially because of how accessible people's lives seemingly are, like with social media, you can see more of what looks like someone's trajectory, which you feel like they did these steps. You don't really know. We have no idea what it is that people sacrifice or what assistance they have or what decisions they made to get where they are. So it's just so important to not compare too much. And I do that. I feel like the more this business grows, the less time I spend on social media. Because it's just, I can't be distracted by what other people are doing. Especially if you're trying to do something that's innovative and different, looking too much at what other people are doing, I feel like can sometimes cloud your judgment. And you start to feel like I need to do these things. And it's okay to take, I feel like, bits and pieces. That's just my general motto when it comes to any advice. When I'm listening to podcasts or reading an article, a workshop, just take what it is that you need. The things that make sense for you, take it. But I actively resist changing what I wanted to do what I see somebody else doing.
I just had an artist on this season who talked about she loves her 9 to 5, and she's
Mm-hmm.
like, but she loves making art, and it works for her. And so I love making sure I'm presenting that balance, because it really, oh my goodness, the choices you make in life really depends on what you want as a person, and you cannot compare your journey to someone else. You have to ask yourself those hard questions.
And I think that's a question that I ask myself a lot. What is it that you want? Because we don't realize how frequently that changes. Like when I quit
Mm-hmm.
my job, the thing that I wanted out of this business was so different from what I want for it now. And it's probably changed like 20 times in the past year alone. I think that just giving
Yeah.
yourself that flexibility, like what you wanted, it's okay for that to change because you learn so much more. Like once you,
Yeah.
sometimes I was just having this conversation earlier this morning as well. Like you say that you want something and then you get it, and sometimes it's not exactly what you thought it was gonna be. It's like I said, I wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur, and now that I'm doing it, it's like, whoa, if I knew that this is what I was signing up for, I might not have done it. Because glad that I did. And I think that's why we can't always know what's coming. Like you say that you want it and then you get it and it's like, ooh, these are the other things that come with it. Working on the weekends and taking meetings late at night. Like I had a meeting with a financial advisor from 7 to 10 p.m. this week. And it was like after I had already worked all day. And I was like, this is crazy. Like I left business school because I didn't want to think about numbers. I said I wanted to run a six-figure business. So this is what it means. You got to have conversations about the money. So yeah, you definitely, I think that I have been trying to find that balance, like you said, of like, what is it that I really want? Um, and then realizing what it takes to get there. Cause I think that's the hard part. Like you say that you
Mm-hmm.
want it, and then we don't always realize that in order to get to that place, you have to do things differently. And that's kind of, I feel like I'm in one of those kind of stages right now of like
I
doing
love
things.
that. And it's interesting because I feel like that applies in so many different areas of your life. For example, for me, for a decade, I lived in this beautiful single family home when I was married. Recently just got divorced. So, those of you guys who have been listening, I'm sure, heard that episode. If not, I will link it in the show notes. But I always grew up like, oh my God, I want this beautiful single family house and this and that. And I love my house. Let me tell you, I loved it. But I'll also tell you, I will never buy a house that big again, because what I realized is I don't want to clean that big of a house, and I don't
Uh,
want to pay anybody to clean that house. It's too much house. It's a waste of house. And so I know in the future, like, nah, something I thought I really wanted,
yes.
I really don't want. Like, I want something small and quaint.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the case for a lot of things when it comes to our career, when it comes to love and life. Like sometimes people think they want children or not want children, or to be married or not married, to be full time or an entrepreneur. And those things, once you get them, you may say, okay, this is great. And sometimes you're like, holy smokes, what have
Yeah.
I done?
Yeah, like the work that goes into having those things. I feel like where I'm at now in my life, especially like building, I'm so deep in building this business and it feels like my baby. But as I'm getting older, it's okay, I want to have a family as well. And I have to think really deeply about like, what would it require of me to run this business to my full capacity and have a family and to not have either one have to get the short end of the stick, and thinking about what
Mm-hmm.
sacrifices do I make now to make the life that I want possible. And so, yeah, I think that, like you said, we don't always know what comes with the things that we want. But I think just like being confident and saying that you want it to begin with, because I think that sometimes it's scary to say your desires out loud out of fear that you won't get them. And that's something that I've been getting more and more comfortable with. Even if it doesn't happen, it's okay to say that you want it. And you can change your mind later if you realize that that's not something. But I think especially for Black women, it's important to be okay with desiring things, especially the things that I think that the example you gave about the house is so important. because it feels like a very traditional people, you want to get your own house, you owning a home. And that's something that, I mean, when I was younger, I wanted the same thing. And now that I get older, and even I have a very small apartment, and I'm like, this is a struggle to keep clean. I cannot imagine, like you said, like having all of this house and stuff. You think that you want it because it looks good, but how does it make you feel? And that's something that I've been
Mm-hmm.
thinking more about, like being less concerned about what it looks like to other people or what it might be perceived as from the outside. And like, does this make me feel good though? Because that's the ultimate thing. Like you have to live in your life. Nobody else does. Like having a big house or having this fancy job or having all these other things, if that makes you happy, that's fine. But sometimes it doesn't even make us happy. It's just like doing it to keep up a facade. And that's something that has been really important for me in my entrepreneurial journey. Like I said, like I feel like I share less on social media. I'm active on there a little bit less because I realize how easy it is to have what you see start to, like, is this something I desire, or is it just what I see?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very easy for the two to get clouded.
I mean, and it's so easy. And what I think is interesting about that is another aspect that what people need to think about is sometimes you're going to go for something and realize maybe you shouldn't have, but that's okay too, because it's better to at least go for it and know, in some
Yes.
cases than for the
Rather than,
fear of, right.
yeah, it's all about like no regrets. And that's how I think that was one of the things that I was feeling when I left my full-time job too. Like knowing that I had to accept, like one of the things that I always do when I was younger, my dad would say to me, like, the worst thing that somebody could say is no. Like whenever I was like asking a question or something that you don't know what the
Yeah.
outcome will be. And that trained me to just think about anytime that I'm worried about how something will turn out, what is the worst case scenario? And often the worst case scenario is not even that bad. No, that's the worst case. Or for me, when I left my job, I was like, okay, maybe the business won't be successful. And so if it's not, then what? And I was like, oh, that's, I could just get a job. Like that's the solution. You go back to work, you get a job, figure something else out. That's not the end of the world. So once I let myself accept that, like that's the worst case scenario, it was like, all right, well, I'm gonna just keep going and make sure that that doesn't happen and do everything in my
Mm-hmm.
power to try to avoid that. So I think I try to remind myself of that. And also whenever people ask me for advice when they're struggling with making certain decisions, it's just, what is the worst that could happen? And if you can live with the worst, then why not go for it?
I tell people that all the time. Even with the podcast, it's funny because I feel like I've reached out to a range of people, from people who are just starting out to
Yeah.
people that everyone knows in the creative community. And sometimes people are like, Nache, how did you get them to come on the podcast? This episode was so amazing. And I was like, I sent them an email. Hey, love
Hmm.
you. Please come on to the podcast, because the worst that could happen is I send you an email, SaVonne, and you respond back and be like, no, no, thank you, right? I mean, I'm not gonna die from that, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think that just reminded me of something else. That's something I feel like I have been thinking about a lot too, as like when you're a business owner, you have to pitch your business to other people and get them to believe in it. And I think that's such an important part of especially early entrepreneurship, because nobody's going to believe in it like you do, especially not in the beginning. Like they don't get it. Like
Right.
it's all in your head. And the results that you've executed so far are not really, in the beginning, it's not what you really envisioned for, but you're starting. And it's so important that even when you're starting, to just be confident and secure in like what it is that you're building and what you're working on. Because even now, like when, like this meeting this week, I had to go do a meeting at the bank to try to get funding. And I was like really nervous about it. I put like this pitch together and I was talking to my mentor, and they were just like, you should never be embarrassed to ask for support or for help,
Mm, mm,
especially if you're doing something good that you believe in. You're not stealing from anybody, you're not hurting anyone. When you're doing good things and when you're doing like honest, valuable work, people see the value in that. And whether they decide to invest or support or not, like there's nothing to be ashamed about with that if they don't understand it. And I think that was something that I didn't think about, that sometimes it is shame around it because you feel like you should have it figured out already or you should be further along than where you are. But I feel like there's no shame in making progress. And as long as you're like constantly trying to do more and you're clear about where you want to go and you're moving with intention and you're in alignment with your purpose, there's nothing shameful. about that, even if no one else gets it. It's something to be proud of, that you're living life on your own terms, trying to make a way, and you're not afraid to ask people for support, ask people to join you on that ride.
You said some stuff that I've written down, and I'm like, okay, I want to ask her because I want to circle
Yes.
back to some things you said about marketing and even like having a mentor. But
Yeah.
before I do that, in the intro, of course, like I've talked about Aya Paper, so they have a general sense of your business. But what was, when you started this in 2019, how did you come up with the name? What was your purpose, the intention behind the business?
So I started the company in 2019, but it was an idea like December 2018. So I took like a
Mm,
good 7 months to plan the launch of it. But when I first started it, I had been writing like for a couple of years, just writing down things that people were saying to me. If I was having a rough day, a friend sent me a text that was just like, "You're so smart and strong and beautiful. The world is lucky to have you." And I was like, that was powerful. I need to screenshot, write this down. Or like, there was just things like that were happening, or like pictures that I would see of like my family, and I'm like, oh, I love this picture. This makes me feel good, and it just feels representative. So I started to create an archive of these things that inspired me and brought me joy, not knowing what I was going to do with them yet. And then something like, as a designer, I feel like I was always trying to sharpen my skills by doing my own personal creative projects. So one day I was like, oh, I like cards. I like stationery. Maybe I'll make some cards based on these things that are just in my kind of like archive of research. And that's how the first few things came to be. I just made a few cards and I put them on my personal portfolio website, and they sold out. It was a short run, but I was like, oh, people like these. I just did this for myself just because I thought it was cool. And then people were like, oh, are you going to do holiday cards? Are you going to do these other ones? Here's some of my ideas. And I'm like, oh, this is a thing. And this was again around the time, like I said before, I was feeling like I was hitting a wall at work, that like I couldn't go beyond like the things that were happening already. Like I wanted to challenge, I wanted to explore and do some new things. So it felt like a good
mm-hmm.
opportunity for me to do that. So I started to think about, okay, I believe everything needs to have an intention. What's the mission behind it? I didn't want to just be making things to make money. So
Mm.
as I was thinking about, when I did that first run of cards, I did make them on recycled paper just because that's just like something that I would do. And I was like, oh, this is something, maybe that's the thing that makes the brand different. Everything is like recycled, and then we can use that as a founding value to help us have an impact on the community. So that's
Mm.
kind of how that all came to be. And then I spent like the next 7 months just getting it tighter, figuring out like what types of designs, like what our values were going to be. And that, I'm so glad that I took that time to just plan it and to have just very close people to me inside and letting them know what I was looking to do. And I'm so glad that a lot of those things that I talked about in the very beginning are still hold true. Like it was really
Mm.
important to me. Like I said, sustainability and being good to the earth is really important. And also for me, it was really important to create things that spark joy. That was like the main thing. Like these things have to spark joy. And if it's not joy, it's like comfort. Like those are the feelings that I wanted to evoke, because I think that everybody could use a little bit more joy. And that's always the intention that I have whenever I would write somebody a card. Is okay, I want to make sure that whatever is in here is going to make them smile, make them feel better, like whatever the intent is behind it. And that still remains true. People always, they're like, I can tell like all the designs, like they have like real thought behind them. I won't produce anything that I'm like is just a throwaway. What is the trying to make people feel? What are we trying to get at? And then also representation of people who are marginalized. So
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost, that's Black folks. Like we don't see ourselves in the stationery industry. The only things that I always would think about, the reason that this is so important, when I would go in the card aisles, I look at what I'm seeing, it's like everything is monolithic. A lot of things look pretty much the same. And then we
Mm-hmm.
have section that the mahogany from Hallmark, and even that, it felt very limiting because I didn't see any representation of people who were queer. I didn't see any representation of people who are not religious Christians. That's the overtone message
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those things. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm sure that helps a lot of people, but it wasn't making me feel represented. It didn't feel like it encompassed like the experiences of other people that I know and love. So that was like, that's all of the reasons why I feel like this brand is so important, and those are the things that I'm thinking about every day when we're creating
Mm-hmm.
new products, we're doing our marketing. Like you can go on our Instagram and you will see black and brown faces for like 99%. And I have no problem with that. Our products are, of course, for everybody, but I have no problem with being open and vocal about the fact that the people who we're serving are people who are not already being serviced. It's okay to be like niche. That's something that I feel like I also talk to new business owners about all the time. Like I think there's this fear of being there's a fear that a lot of people have around if they know that I'm Black, if they know that I'm a woman, would they not support my business? Or
Mm-hmm.
if they know that I have these values, like everything is sustainable and I have these really strong mission, that they won't want to work with me. And it's that's one of those, it's a projection of insecurities. That I use that example of like our Instagram and of not being apologetic about our values, because that hasn't stopped us from any opportunities. We've been in Nordstrom, Kohl's, Macy's, work with Netflix, like all of these people, and no one has ever said, "Oh, can you send us something that doesn't have a Black face on it?" Or can you do something that's a little bit less ethnic? Nobody says that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because we're clear and we're firm about who we are, and people see and understand authenticity. And that's just so important to me with I, that it always remains authentic and there's always like a purpose behind everything that we do.
So Aya, does that have a meaning, or did it just kind of like flow and you're like, oh, I like the sound of Aya? Just curious.
Yeah, I need to figure out a more interesting answer to this question. When I was doing like my brainstorm trying to figure out like what it would be called, I came up with it because my childhood nickname is Yaya. That's what my family calls me. And I just took the
Mm,
first Y off. And I was like, that's cute. It's symmetrical kinda, and it's
yeah.
simple. It's pretty. People can pick up on it. So yeah, it's based on my childhood nickname.
And so, as far as I just wanted to talk to you about marketing, because I
Hmm.
thought what you said about marketing yourself and being comfortable with putting your business out there was really important and really good. It's funny, Nache, who's a co-host with me this season, in one of the episodes, we talked about that a little bit, because sometimes as creatives, we just want to create. It's like, I gotta market? Yeah, I gotta tell people? Like,
Yeah.
won't they just come? No. And so, what did you do in order to put yourself out there? What worked for you?
Yeah, there's been so many different ways. I think that's the most important part of marketing that I try to get to whenever I'm advising people is you have to diversify. You have to do as many different ways as possible, because just one is never going to be enough. But at the beginning, it was Instagram, setting up an Instagram account and a website. Like, I think that those are like bare minimum for marketing. You have to be like easy for people to find. So, website and constantly updating our website, adding more things to it. Instagram, being consistent there, posting, a Facebook page, a LinkedIn account, like any platform where you can have an account and people can find you, just set it up. Sharing, more recently, something that we've been doing is like sharing our press features and articles. And I really like those types of things because I feel like from like on LinkedIn, for example, like that's a more recent platform that we're using for marketing. And on that, it's about building up our status as like an industry leader and an innovator. And that's what LinkedIn is for. People talking about things professionally. So there we share like different articles that we've been featured in. Like recently, I was in a Refinery 29 article about 5 women rethinking environments. Yes, it was very,
Yay! I love Refinery 29. Yeah.
yeah, so that was okay, let's share this on our platform to show people what we're doing. And that brought in so a great audience, like I said on LinkedIn, of people who are like professionals who want to help network and like, give us different resources. And it's, oh my gosh, I was missing out on that whole possibility of putting my business out there in a professional sense, and people like
Mm.
investing in us from what are the values that we have and like the things that we're creating. Like Instagram, that's where we market basically like our products to get sales and to sell like our brand identity. Email, like we use that as marketing. We have SMS texting, and it's all of this has developed over time. Like paid ads, that's something that we recently started. But like I said, in the beginning, it was just website and Instagram. So I think that
Mm.
like for me, marketing is all about like constantly thinking of new ways to expand and add new things to what you're doing. Because like another example, we just recently went on Pinterest, and there's the Pinterest
Mm.
audience.
Love
There are a lot of
Pinterest.
people who aren't on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or emails. Like they may not find us in any of those other ways, but now we found the people who are interested in specifically curated products. They're interested in finding new brands to shop from through this way. So yeah, marketing is it's a challenge. And I think I understand what you were saying about like when you're creative, it's difficult to do that because I've had to force myself to do that part of it. But I think that's the difference between being like a creative and an entrepreneur. I just put that together just now. Like when you're creative, you're just making and not worrying about how it gets distributed or who sees it. But if you want to have a business, like you have to make it and figure out how people are going to get it.
And I think press scares people too. They're like, "Oh, what do you mean? Like, how do I get in the press?" Right?
I mean, it's press is hard. And I think that we've been very lucky to get a lot of organic press of like people just reaching out to us and wanting to feature us in things here and there. But I think that a lot of it is also just like talking about it because you don't know like editors and people who are writers like they're watching, they're on social media, they're looking for brands to feature, and you never know if you have a friend who like works for a company. Like our first press feature was from someone who I worked with maybe 4 years ago, like a
Mm.
contract job. We're not even like very close, but she was working. Our first feature is in People magazine, and it was Gammy from Red Table Talk. She did like a
Ah.
holiday guide list, and someone that I used to work with was like on their PR team and was like, "Oh, do you have holiday stuff? I'm gonna put you up for this list." And I was like, "What? Yeah, sure." But that's all it was because I kept talking about it and she saw that I had a business and I was not afraid to talk about it. So when an opportunity presented itself, she put our name in the circle. And I feel like once you get the first one or the first two, like it becomes easier. And I will also give advice as far as like anybody who wants to get more PR coverage. There's a great episode of, I have to look up the podcast, but I think it's My Leak's podcast.
Mm,
She has
mm, mm-hmm.
an episode about doing your own PR. And I listened to that
Yeah.
like a month after I started the business, and it was so beneficial. They talked about what to include in like your own press doc, having your images already pulled, having captions, having your press boilerplate, like all in one folder so it's easily shareable. And after I listened to that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna set this up because when the press requests start coming in, I want to be ready. And now that same press kit that we put together ourselves, we use like now whenever people reach out or if we want to pitch to somebody. And that's the thing too, don't be afraid of pitching to media outlets. If you
Yeah.
see a writer for Refinery 29 who's always writing listicles about like brands you should know, reach out to them, send them an alert that you have something new. So yeah, I think that press is so important. Can't be scared of it. All you have to do is try. No one's everybody. There's levels to press. Like everybody doesn't have a PR agency with a full press release for every product, but you can send an email with a picture and your boilerplate. Just
Because
do what feels accessible to you.
because if it goes back to what we were chatting about at the beginning of the episode, is all they can say is no or not respond.
Exactly, exactly. That's
It's
literally
like nothing's gonna happen to you, right? Yeah.
Refinery 29 because you just asked. So, yeah, you definitely got to be willing to put yourself out there. It's scary at first, but the more you do it, the easier it gets.
And then you also mentioned having a mentor. At what point did you decide to get a mentor? And what did that look like? Because people are, I think, in talking to you, some people who I know have even had businesses for several years now, they're like, oh, should I do a mastermind? Should I get a mentor? How much should I pay for? Because sometimes the really well known and good mentors aren't cheap, right? And sometimes they're free because sometimes you could go to your local SBA and get somebody who's been in business for 20 years to be your mentor for free. And so I think it's a tricky space to navigate and try to find that right person or group. So how did that work for
Yeah.
you?
So, I have quite a few mentors and like advisors, actually. And all of them have come into my life in different ways. The mentors that I've been working really closely with lately, they've known me since I was a little girl. Like we met, they were like family friends when I was younger, and they've just been in my life. And I knew that they've had businesses and they're very smart business people for years. And we were, the basis of our relationship was not even my business. They've just all been people who supported me
Mm-hmm.
throughout my life. And when the business started to get to this point where I was like, I don't know what to do, I knew they had always extended themselves as if you ever need anything, you need support, we want to help, let us know. So when I needed the help, I reached out to them and let them know, and they just showed up for me and have been so instrumental in guiding me
Mm-hmm.
through challenges that I'm having. And for me, the for that mentorship relationship, the best part of that for me is the sometimes you need somebody to tell that it's not nearly as bad as what you think. Like the problem that you're facing, it's completely solvable. People have gone through this and gotten over it before. Don't beat yourself up about it. And that was what I needed more than anything because it's so hard when you feel like you're in it on your own and nobody gets it and you can't really go to anybody. So for me, that's what mentorship is most helpful for, to be around people who have been through what you've been through and came out on the other side and can reassure you that you'll figure it out. This isn't the end. This isn't the worst thing
Mm-hmm.
that can happen. I've had other mentors who I got through like community organizations. There's a great, if anybody listening is in New Jersey, Newark Makerhoods, they're a really great organization
Mm-hmm.
here and they help businesses with resources. The month before I decided to quit my job, I reached out to them like, hey, I'm about to do this full-time entrepreneurship thing. I don't really know what I'm getting into. Like, I kind of know, but I need some additional help. And for free, I had meetings with their team like bi-weekly, sometimes every week for like hours. Like they helped me get my business registered, helped me get like my first business bank account.
Mm.
So that was really helpful because I could have probably figured some of those things out on my own, but it's so much easier when you have someone to help you and point you in the right direction so that you can save time and just do it quicker. And that's what I feel like is such a great benefit of having other people around. Because like I said, it's not that you can't do it, but it's just like, why do it alone if you could have the help? Um,
Right.
yeah, but I mean, I personally, I always think that it's better to have, if you have access to people who will do it for you for free because they care, I always feel like that's better than someone who you're paying to be your mentor. You think they're going to go above and beyond for you anyway, just because they want to do it, because they genuinely want to help you. When you're
Yeah.
paying for it, people are viewing it as a service. I think that something that this is a shameless plug, but I offer business consultations. They're paid, but it's like an hour, and I've had 5 of them so far this year, and just all that I set that time aside for people who they have specific challenges or questions that they want advice for, whether that's you want to get into wholesale or you're trying to build a team or you're trying to figure out how to expand your product line, how to make your process more efficient. Like I will get
Mm-hmm.
on a call with you and give you all of the resources. Like I'm not trying to nickel and dime for, every little thing, but it's just you want to make that investment in yourself to get access to, information. I think that there are plenty of people who will be open to that. Like we were saying before, not the worst that can happen is they say no. So sending that email, sending that DM, hey, I'm a business owner. I see you are, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're doing something else, but like you think that their insight would be valuable. You can learn something from them. Just ask and be very kind and courteous and complicated.
Right.
But I think that that goes so far, especially when people see that you're committed and you're taking your business seriously. What I don't like
Mm.
is people reaching out, hey, can you send me your printer? Who makes your stuff? Um,
It's
you never
like,
heard, girl,
right.
delete.
Like,
Like that's not how you ask people for help or support. And that's the type of stuff that you usually pay for to be in a mastermind where they're just going to give you a list of vendors and
like,
resources. Yeah, that's one thing. But I think that it was more beneficial if you're somebody when you've already done the legwork and gotten as far as your own knowledge will take you, mentors and advisors are the people who help you go further. That's how I think about it. So I don't want like a
mm-hmm.
mentor advisor who can tell me the things that I can figure out on my own. I need somebody to help me see I'm not even thinking about this problem that I'm going to have in 6 months, but because you've done this before and you'll warn me and you'll help me like get prepared for that. So yeah, mentorship is it's invaluable. You need to have one, and it doesn't have to be like formal. Like I said, it could just be somebody that you have,
Mm-hmm.
that has a hair salon. She probably knows something about paying taxes or about
Right.
having employees or you have your licenses and everything. I think that we undercut, like, we not undercut, but we don't always see the value in the people who are right in our circle because you just think of them, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
just my friend, that's just my aunt, that's just my cousin, but they have other
They know
full
some
lives and
stuff.
experiences that you can learn from, but we don't always ask, especially I feel like in the Black community, like there's so much taboo, especially around like money and work. And I think it keeps us hindered because we're afraid to ask somebody, how did you build your business? What are the struggles in your business? We don't want to be transparent about that, but it doesn't, I think that it goes back to what we were saying before about shame. There's no shame in struggling to build something that's yours. Like
I agree.
you're doing your best. Everybody's doing their best. So it's like as long as you're putting your best foot forward before you ask for the help, I think that it'll come to you because people like see ambition and drive and they see when you're consistent and committed to what you're doing.
It's like we cannot build generational wealth if we are afraid to ask those questions. And
Yes.
it would take us down a dark path. So I'm not going to even get into my thoughts of the person who just asked you for the printer because, okay, people, Google, my friends. One, do some homework. And two, if you ask a question and someone doesn't give you the answer, don't get mad at them for not giving you the information they work hard to get.
And
I,
that's the thing, like mentorship is not about somebody giving you all of the answers. That's not what a mentorship or somebody doing the work for you. No, they did all of that work themselves, so you got to do it too. They might hold your hand, give you some pointers, help you go left instead of right, but they like no one else can do the work for you. And I think that an important thing too that I feel like I've noticed with other people that I've worked with or advised that a mentorship is only going to be successful if you know what it is that you need or you are bringing something to the table. Like you can't go to a meeting with someone and say, well, I don't even know if I like my business model. I don't even know if these products are good. Do you think I should change the product? Do you think I should change my website? What? Do you not have thoughts of your own? And that's, I get it. Like
red
sometimes
flag. Yeah.
don't know what we're doing, but it's just no, nobody, why would somebody want to mentor you? You have no ideas or you don't have like that vision of your own. Like you have to come with
Mm-hmm.
something because mentorship is a give and take. If someone wants to mentor you, they probably want to feel like it's going to be worth their time. You're going to make the most of it and you're going to take advantage of the resources that they have to give. So I
Right.
think that's the most important thing. It's not that you can give them a job or you can do something for them in return, but just people want to know that you're not going to take their resources for granted and that you're going to actually do something with it to help yourself improve.
No, I love that. This episode is gold, people. I hope you guys have been like
Yes, I'm a
sucking
listen.
it all in, sucking it all in, listeners. So before I wrap up, because of course I just have to wrap up and ask you
Yes.
about just how you stay organized. But I mean, since it was just a year ago that not only did the pandemic start, but also we went through this whole social justice movement, right?
Yeah.
And as a Black business that really had just started out, what were your thoughts and feelings around that? Were you able to still function as a business? Did you just have to mentally decompress and step away? I mean, that was just, it was, it was like such an emotional period. So just curious your thoughts on that. And I know that's the kind of a very open, heavy question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good one though. I was talking recently with a friend about we were talking actually about 2016 and how heavy that year felt. And I
Mm,
remember I was living in New York and I was going to protests on a regular basis. I had
mm,
was designing like protest signs all of the time. And that was like I would say like the depth of my grief around violence against Black bodies in America. And I that time it was very difficult emotionally and mentally, and I had an experience when I was at a protest and a cop put his hands on me and I had a complete anxiety attack just thinking about like how that could have ended. And after that I said that I could not go to any more protests. I couldn't engage anymore because it was too traumatic for me. So
mm.
when last year rolled around, it felt like a lot of those feelings were coming back to the surface, but that's kind of I'm so grateful for this business and how it's allowed me to reframe my emotions. In that time, like I was thinking, what can we do to help people? And a lot of that was continue to do what we already do. If our mission is to bring joy to Black people, this is when we need it the most. So on social media and our emails, like everything, that's when we know that we're being inundated by images of violence and of suffering and of messages about negative things that are happening to us. So I didn't want to be a part of what everyone else is already doing. I wanted to do something different. And for us, that meant being a source of joy. That meant making donations to nonprofit organizations when, like in June, it was so difficult to know that we're in the depth of a terrible time in this country, but we had our biggest sales month still to this day last June. And
Mm,
it's that was very how people treated capitalism as a solution to violence. And it made me very uncomfortable. So that's why I
mm,
was like,
mm-hmm.
okay, we're gonna makes me uncomfortable. What can I do with this for my people? So we donated money to Sustainable Brooklyn. They had a rent fund that was going on for Black folks. And we donated to Newark's Jana on Grafton. It's an urban farm here in Newark that we work closely with. Donated to an organization in Atlanta that helps to protect Black incarcerated trans folks. So doing those things helped me to help give me some solace in knowing that we're not exacerbating the issue. We're doing what we can to provide some relief in very material ways. So that's what I've been doing to help me cope with kind of, like I said, that feeling of like, why are we using capitalism as a solution to violence? And I think about it a lot because that's what last June felt like to me. It was like, this is a place to be. And I'm grateful because we're getting more visibility, but not on the blood of people who were killed by the cops. That didn't feel right. So it is something that I still struggle with to this day. But like I said, the best way to cope with that is ensuring that we're planting resources like right back into the community, because that's who needs it. It's more than about just me. And I guess from a personal standpoint, like how I deal with those things, same way I was saying I'm off of social media, I unplug because there's so much trauma. And I got to a point where I realized that I live in this every day in my entire life. Like I don't have to prove it through a social media post. I don't have to go above and beyond to show that I know what's going on. And that's been very liberating. It's giving myself the permission to not perform grief for anyone. So yeah, that's what I've been doing personally. I feel like you figure out every day, you take it one day at a time, because this isn't just, for a lot of people, it was just 2016 or it was just 2020 or just a month. But for us, it's every day, really. The things that were causing us pain,
Yeah.
it's still painful today, but we have to keep living life and find things that bring us joy and to find reasons to, well, just have more ways to show people that we love them, we care about them while they're here, and to invest material resources back into the community, more than just saying we're for Black people, but show that you're for Black people with your dollar. And that's how I've been navigating all of these things. Yeah.
I also had a conversation with another guest about this too, because I know for brands like yours, I can only imagine how kind of conflicting it was. But my whole thing is, I am glad that they invested in brands like yours, because they invested. Think about all the things that you were now able to invest in. And I think when people, when this was going on, people were asking, like, what do I do? And so I think people of all cultures were investing in brands like yours, but also investing in organizations and also writing letters to their local whoever. So it was a combination of things. So even though you as a business owner might have been like, ooh, this doesn't feel right, I hold on to the hope that it was really just one part of a person's strategy to
Absolutely.
make sure that they were supporting their outrage for what was happening.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that it's all about baby steps. Like, it's hard if the first step for you is buying from a Black business before you can understand because for me, buying from Black business is the first step in us understanding how poverty and how being stuck in poverty and not having opportunities to build wealth, how that affects our families and how it affects our communities. So even though just money isn't the total solution, it's a start, and it helps us to see that in order to see improvements, we have to invest and we have to keep the money with us and just circulate the Black dollar for longer. And I think that's one of the other things that I love about IA. It gives people the opportunity to do that. People, especially here in Newark, if you live in Newark, you get to spend your money for like your gifts and your cards with a local Black woman owned business. And you didn't get to do that before. Even like I've been realizing we don't have any stockists really in Newark. We have one stockist in Newark, and that's because there aren't gift shops, because there's no opportunity for people to go and celebrate. And that was something that just like when I made that realization, it's wow, who gets to celebrate life? We see
Yeah.
gift shops in urban white neighborhoods all of the time. Why don't we get to have things to celebrate? Why don't we have the ability to just have like leisurely moments of joy? And that's something that I think is really important with the brand, because we're not a necessity, really. People don't need to have cards to live. It makes us feel good to have them. And it provides these little moments where you can show people that you appreciate them and that they're worth being noticed and being seen. So I'm grateful that people see the value in our products and what it can do for our self-image, our self-esteem, how we care for each other, how we care for the planet, because it's all connected. And I
It
think that just
is.
creating a culture of care is so important for our community long term. Like, how can we support each other through grief and through violence if we can't say, I care about you, I love you, I'm happy you're here. And that's what our cards allow people to say. Even, I know you're having a hard time, but I'm here for you. Those are the types of messages that I think we need to normalize, and we need to just be more comfortable saying and expressing to the people.
I agree. Okay, last question. I promise
Yeah.
I have kept you way too long, people. If you are hanging in here, this is a long episode. I know, but I know you love it every minute of it and getting things out of it. I am going to make sure I respect SaVonne's time, but I have to ask, how do you stay organized? You have this business, it's thriving. There's a lot of moving parts, I'm sure. And we didn't even get into like wholesale and just getting into stores, and I won't even go down that rabbit hole. But how do you keep everything organized?
Yeah. So the one specific tool I will always say is Calendly. Calendly saves so much time and just like scheduling meetings, going back and forth, knowing when that calendar invite is. So, and Calendly is owned by a Black person, so love that. CEO is a Black guy, so I love that. I can support Calendly. If you're somebody who has a lot of meetings, like I know you use it as well, it's just so important to like help save your time and also to set boundaries. Like when you're just going back and forth in emails, it's easy to slip up and schedule a meeting after hours or schedule a meeting on a time when you really don't want to. So just having those rules set up in Calendly that like I have to have at least an hour between two meetings, and don't schedule more than two meetings in a day, and make sure that, no meetings after 7 p.m. Like those are all really important for me to feel like I have some control over my schedule, even though it gets really busy. So yeah, I definitely always recommend Calendly. I also stay organized because I have a really great project manager who I recently December, and Nika holds it all the way down. She like set up all these extra inboxes, so now everything isn't coming to my inbox. We have a PR inbox and orders inbox. So that feels really nice. Set up an auto reply. That was something that was really helpful for me with taking the pressure off of like constantly replying to people. Just, hey, got it. I'll reply in 1 to 2 days. And just that alone has helped release some of the anxiety around like constantly needing to be attentive and like answering every inquiry like as it comes in, and staying up late answering emails. I'm a big list person. I keep most of my to-do lists like on written out. I don't write them on computer. It's very hard for me to keep track of it that way. But just every week I write out my list, and I used to just be like one full list, but now I organize it by things that are high priority, medium priority, and low priority. So I can, go through the list accordingly, and also having a section for things that I need to design, because that feels like design feels like a completely different part of my brain from like emails and other types of work, and then things that I need to hold my team accountable for. So those are like the 5 categories on like my to-do list. And I think it's really helpful for me to organizing my time, so I know, okay, I have 3 things I need to design this week. Let me make sure I set aside one day to do that. Or I have like only 2 high priority things, but a bunch of low priority things. So let me just knock out one big high priority thing today. That's been really helpful for me to just know what to do first, because there's so many things when you're an entrepreneur that like have to get done. So just having a clear view of like, okay, if the things in this low priority don't get done this week, that's okay. And that for me is better for organizing rather than just having a massive list of 30 things with no sense of where to start. But yeah, those are my organization things. And also I think that it changed, the things that I used to stay organized change so frequently because I'm constantly trying to get better about it. It's not easy. There are some days like I had to reschedule this call a couple of times because it's just like I signed up to do way too many things. I didn't think about this. I wasn't prepared. So I think that an important part of being organized with your business is giving yourself room to mess up and to try again, and to just like constantly be changing it. Like it's hard to, nobody comes up with their organization system in a day. Like you have to try it, it works for you. And just like how we said before, everybody's business is different. Everybody's organization is different. So like the things that make you feel, for me, I know when something is well organized when I don't feel anxious about it. I can leave it and not be, did I forget this? Did I do that? What is the next? Like having some sort of control and no panicking. Those are organization tips.
And please just tell the listeners where they can support you. Any website, social media, all the things, anything you want to share, please let them know how to find you.
So you can follow me on Instagram at simply.SaVonne. That's simply.SaVonne. And you can follow Aya. It's at ayapaper.co. And that's also our website, ayapaper.co. If you want to shop with us, we have lots of cards, calendars, journals, candles, tote bags, and everything is made sustainably. And oh, here I'm going to give you guys a discount code too. So if you use,
Woo!
you can get 15% off your first order if you use code WELCOME15.
Perfect. We love a little discount code.
Points.
Perfect. Thank you, SaVonne. I appreciate you talking to me about all the things.
Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.
So, what did I tell you guys? If you're listening to my voice right now, that means you enjoyed this episode too. It was good. Anyway, let me know how much you liked it by heading over to Instagram at Nache Snow and just comment if you're listening to this the week it came out. Please make sure to comment under the post. I would love, love, love to hear from you. And just go over there anyway and follow me and say hey. Also, thanks for the code, SaVonne, the Welcome 15 code. So remember to go over to ayapaper.co and make sure that you all support her. You get 15% off the Welcome 15. Nice. Okay. So, you guys know the drill. If you found this inspirational, sharing is caring, my friends. Please share this with your friends. Also, I never really say this, but if you want to hear from me every once in a while, head on over to nachesnow.com/newsletter and sign up for my newsletter. I think my newsletter is pretty good. Let me know. You could unsubscribe anytime. No harm, no foul. All right. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to rate it 5 stars on Apple or whatever podcast app you're listening to. If you're on YouTube, hey, YouTube people, please give me a thumbs up. And wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. All right. Until next week, bye.